Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time when winter wasn't a season. It was a test of your endurance, your community, and frankly, your will to keep breathing when the world outside tried very hard to make you stop. Imagine the sun dipping below the crooked rooftops of a medieval village. The horizon bruises pink and purple, but no one's admiring the view. They're nailing shutters closed. The wind has teeth. It whistles through every crack in the walls, nosing into homes like an uninvited ghost. Chimneys begin to sputter, hearths groan to life. Somewhere an ox coughs. You're lucky if you've got a cow to cough in the barn at all. And you're here, stepping into a night hundreds of years old. You're not a knight or a noble. You're just you. Maybe a peasant, maybe a kitchen boy, maybe a baron with gout, and not nearly enough firewood. But whatever your station, the cold doesn't discriminate. And tonight, you'll feel it settle into your bones. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments, where are you tuning in from? And what time is it right now for you? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie back, close your eyes, and suddenly you're standing in a medieval field. The last harvest is in, the granaries creak with stores, and every villager prays it's enough. A frost has already nipped the corners of the fields. You swear you can hear the wheat whispering good luck as it's bundled into storage. Because once winter begins in earnest, luck might be all that keeps you alive. Historians still argue whether the worst winters of the so-called Little Ice Age started in the early 1300s or spiked in the 1600s. But for people like you, living day to day, bowl to bowl, it didn't matter when the worst began. It always felt like it never ended. By now, you've sealed up the windows with old cloth and moss. You've patched the roof with pitch if you could afford it, or dung if you couldn't. You've herded the livestock into the barn, not out of love, but out of self-preservation. Their bodies throw heat. They're more space heater than pet. The air is ripe, but hey, warmth is warmth. You carry firewood like it's gold, because it might as well be. Gathering it is illegal in many forests. You could be flogged for dragging home a fallen branch if it belonged to the local lord. And yet, you risk it. You need the fire. Here's a fringe fact for you. Some medieval folk believed hanging a frog's skin over your door would keep winter spirits out. You try it anyway. At this point, you'd kiss the frog if it meant a warmer night. Inside the cottage, your breath clouds the air like smoke. The walls are rough timber. The floor is packed dirt. Every step you take makes a soft crunch. Old straw, cold ash, maybe a beetle, if you're lucky enough to still have pests this time of year. A child stirs in the corner, wrapped in a ragged cloak, cheeks flushed from the cold. They're dreaming of roasted goose and spiced wine, things they've never tasted. But in dreams, the poor get to feast. A rat scurries behind the cupboard. You don't chase it. Let it have the crumbs. Tomorrow you might catch it. That's protein, after all. Your stomach growls. Not for the first time tonight. Not for the last. Your eyes linger on the fire, the center of your universe now. It crackles unevenly, fed with kindling so green it weeps. But it burns. Just barely. You think of the stories the elders tell about winters where the fire died and never came back. Whole families frozen before New Year. But here you are, alive, still standing. And for now, that's enough. Just outside, the snow begins to fall. Not gently, not beautifully, not like a postcard or a holiday card or any of the syrupy things modern people imagine. Number this snow hisses. It slams against the roof in sharp little fists. It wants in. You pull your cloak tighter. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls. You count the chimes. 8. That means matin soon. You won't go. Not tonight. Your boots are cracked and the wind would peel the skin from your face. Let the monks pray. You've got your own religion now. Fire, food, and making it to march. And yet, through it all, there's beauty. A quiet one. The kind that creeps in while your fingers thaw over the flame and the children huddle against your side. You tell them stories, old ones, ones that begin with long ago and end with and spring came, as it always does. They nod off, heads resting on your shoulder, warm breath tickling your arm. You brush hair from their eyes and whisper, "Tomorrow we'll eat better." You lie, but gently. It's not just your breath that fogs the air. It's hope. It's fear. It's everything in between. You tuck your feet beneath the woven mat and pretend not to hear the wind clawing at the door. Welcome to winter. You probably won't survive this, but you might. You wake just before dawn, and your first breath stings. The air inside your hut is so cold it seems to bite the inside of your nose, burning its way into your chest like you're inhaling needles. You blink slowly. A layer of frost has crept up the walls overnight, glittering faintly in the dim gray light. The fire's gone out. Of course it has. Wood burns fast when it's green, and you were down to the smallest sticks last night. You try not to move too much. Underneath your thin blanket, warmth clings to your body like the last loyal dog in a storm. But already the cold has slipped in. Your toes ache, your fingers feel like blocks of wood, and the straw beneath you crunches with ice. You groan softly as you shift, trying not to disturb the sleeping bundle of limbs and breaths beside you. Your family, huddled tight for warmth like stacked firewood. You sit up, breath puffing in the air like smoke from a dying chimney, and you see your own shadow dance across the wall, not from firelight, just a sliver of dawn squeezing through the crooked shutter. You shuffle to the hearth and poke at last night's ashes, half hoping a coal survived. It didn't. You knew it wouldn't, but you try anyway. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actually understood the principles of insulation. Some say they stuffed their clothes with straw or moss to keep out drafts. Others insist it was mostly wishful thinking and goose fat. Either way, you do what you can. You pull on a tunic that smells like smoke and old onions and brace yourself for the morning. The floor bites your feet. Your breath mists. A small pot waits near the hearth. It holds yesterday's breakfast, or what was left of it. A bit of porridge hardened into something that might survive a siege. You scrape at it anyway. Outside, a rooster crows like he doesn't realize he's the only one who still believes in spring. You open the door and step outside. The snow is crusted, dense, and sharp-edged from the wind. You take a moment to brace for it. The slap of icy air on your face, the sting in your lungs, the way your bones clench as if trying to retreat deeper inside you. And still, life must go on. You head toward the woods to scavenge what little fuel remains. Your path crunches beneath your boots, the snow packed with layers of old footprints, yours, your neighbors, and maybe a fox or two. You look up. Smoke curls from only half the chimneys in the village. the other half didn't make it through the night. Or they ran out of fuel. Or worse, there's a tree near the edge of the woods with low-hanging branches. You've taken from it before, even though you're not supposed to. Technically, the forest belongs to the Lord, and all fallen wood is his. But technically, he has 5 fireplaces and a cellar full of brandy. You have chilblains and a spoon. You break off a few branches, tuck them under your arm, and trudge back to your home. The wind cuts sideways now, sharp, slicing. Your hands are going numb, but you don't want to drop the wood. You wrap your fingers around it tighter until your nails throb. Just before you reach the hut, your foot slips on ice. You go down hard, knee first. The pain is quick and hot, a rude shock, like the weather itself is laughing at you. But you keep hold of the wood. Small mercies. You limp back inside, drop the wood near the hearth, and exhale a curse under your breath. Not loud enough for the children to hear. You're supposed to be the strong one, or at least the warm one. You strike the flint. Once. Twice. A spark jumps. Then again. It catches the straw bundle. The fire takes slowly. You hunch near it, hands cupped, hoping the warmth sinks deep. For now, you live in this single moment. Fingers thawing by a flame no larger than a mouse. Across the room, your youngest coughs in her sleep. A dry, hacking sound that makes your heart twist. She's too thin this year. They all are. You promised yourself you'd do better, and maybe you did. Maybe you just can't outrun winter. You make a note to ask the priest for more herbs. Not that they help much, but he says prayers with them. And maybe that's the part that matters. Here's something odd. In some villages, people used to believe that winter air itself was poisonous, that the fog carried demons. They'd burn herbs just to clear the air. You've done it yourself. Bay leaves, sage, whatever's left. The smell doesn't drive away the cold, but it masks the scent of damp wood and sick. You glance at the wall where the frost still clings. You draw a little shape in it. A circle, a sun, just to remind yourself it exists. Then you rise and stir the porridge again. It's not much, just barley and water and a pinch of salt if you're lucky. You spoon it out carefully, equally, each child getting a scoop. No one complains. No one dares. They eat silently, hunched over, blowing on the steam that barely registers against the cold. You take what's left and eat it standing up, because if you sit, you might not get up again, because the ache in your legs and back has settled in like an old friend who refuses to leave. And yet, you're grateful for this bowl, for this fire, for the fact that today, no one in your house is dead. Not yet. The wind howls again, and the door creaks as if considering whether to blow open. You whisper, "Not today." Outside, the sky turns a shade lighter, but it doesn't warm. This is morning. This is winter. And you begin again. You start to think about food even before you finish chewing breakfast. That's the trick of winter. You're never really full. Hunger sits with you like a quiet second shadow, tapping your shoulder, whispering doubts. You mentally tally the sacks in the loft. The last of the dried peas, half a wheel of cheese so hard you could roof a barn with it, and one shriveled turnip that looks more like a shrunken head than dinner. You had meant to save that turnip for Sunday, maybe with a bone broth, maybe with hope. Outside, the sun hangs like a pale coin, worth little, spends quickly. You step out into the crunch of snow again, this time with an empty basket in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. It's for the nettles. If you're lucky, you'll find a few green leaves under the snowdrifts. They sting going in, but once boiled with onions, they turn almost noble. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actually foraged out of desperation or ritual. Was it necessity, or did they genuinely believe in the curative powers of roots and wild garlic? Either way, you know how to spot chickweed from poison, and right now, you'd eat moss if it tasted even vaguely like stew. You trudge along the path that leads past the village edge. The snow swirls like someone shook a feather pillow over the land. Your feet are wet by now. Not cold exactly, just missing. Somewhere inside the boots, your toes have stopped reporting in. You hope they'll return. A man passes you on the road, dragging a sled with a single log on it. He nods. You nod. Neither of you say a word. Talking takes breath. Breath makes fog. Fog draws attention. It's winter code. Save your energy. Everyone's playing the same game of slow survival. You find a patch of half-dead bramble near the fence line and kneel beside it, careful not to cut yourself on the thorns. You dig through the snow, revealing a few green sprigs beneath. Miraculous little rebels that didn't get the memo to die. Into the basket they go. You find mushrooms too, small gray leathery things growing out of an old stump. You poke them with the knife. They're safe, or at least they won't kill you quickly. You've become an expert in edible versus regrettable. Somewhere behind you, a bell rings from the chapel tower, probably for a funeral. They've been ringing often lately. You make your way back home slowly, dragging your legs like sacks of oats. The hunger gets louder with every step. You think about that last turnip again. Maybe tonight. You pass old Widow Anna's house. Her door is ajar. You pause. She hasn't been out in days. Not to fetch water, not to beg for firewood, not even to air out her blankets like she usually does, no matter how cold it gets. You step inside quietly. The smell hits first, faint, sweet, metallic. She's lying in the bed, still bundled in every piece of cloth she owns. Her mouth is open. Her eyes aren't. You feel something shift in your chest, but not surprise. Just resignation. You walk over, pull the blanket up over her face, and whisper something you think might count as a prayer. You take her kettle. She won't need it now. And maybe tomorrow you'll come back for the turnip she kept in her root basket. Hunger makes thieves of everyone, but today you still have yours. Back home, the children haven't noticed you left. They're sitting by the fire, such as it is, drawing on a frost-covered clay tile with charcoal. One of them has drawn a sun with a smiling face. You say nothing, just hang up your coat and begin sorting your spoils. Nettles in the pot, mushrooms rinsed, a bit of barley tossed in from the jar you've hidden behind the firewood pile. You add water, cold, always cold, and hang the pot over the fire. Here's a strange one. Some people believed you could bless food by whispering to it as it cooked, that your breath would carry warmth, luck, even flavor. So you whisper nonsense words, half-remembered lullabies, whatever floats up from your tired mind. The stew bubbles eventually. It smells green. Not bad, just vegetal, like boiled weeds. Because it is. You serve it with flatbread, made from the last of the rye flour. It's more like a cracker than bread, but it holds the stew, and no one complains. You chew slowly, pretending not to notice the youngest licking the bowl. You tell a story as they eat. Something about a knight who tricked a dragon by offering it turnip stew instead of gold. The dragon liked the stew so much it stopped hoarding treasure and opened a bakery. The children laugh. One asks what a bakery is. You change the subject. A knock comes at the door, sharp, quick, urgent. You freeze. Visitors in winter are rarely friendly. It's the Reeve, the Lord's tax collector. He wants your grain tithe. You stare at him a moment, then nod. You go to the loft, fetch the small sack you've been hiding, and hand it over without a word. He doesn't thank you, just leaves. You don't tell the children. You don't tell yourself. But tomorrow's stew just got smaller. That night, you stare at the ceiling. It leaks in the corner now. A single drop every 10 seconds. You count them instead of sheep. 1, 2, 3. Outside, the wind has changed. It whistles through the trees like a lullaby sung by wolves. Inside, you whisper to the fire again, hoping it doesn't die before you do. Your stomach growls. Your heart thumps. And tomorrow, you'll be hungry again. But you'll wake up. Probably. You hear the cough before you open your eyes. It's dry, sharp, the kind of cough that drills straight into the base of your spine. Not because of the sound itself, but because of what it means. You don't need to guess who it is. It's your eldest, the one with freckles and a stubborn streak. The one who started with a runny nose 2 nights ago. The one who's too proud to say they feel worse. But the cough has changed, deeper now, like something settling in the lungs. You sit up and press the back of your hand to their forehead. Warm. Too warm. And not the good kind. Fever warmth, the kind that comes with cold sweat and glassy eyes. You glance at the fire. It's down to embers. You throw on more wood, your second to last handful, and blow gently until the flames sputter back to life. You place a damp rag on your child's head. They groan in their sleep. You whisper promises you can't keep. Welcome to the 6th season. Historians still argue whether the spike in illness during medieval winters was more due to close quarters or poor ventilation. Realistically, both. You're crammed into a single room with 7 souls, a goat, and a chamber pot that froze last night. The smoke hangs heavy in the rafters, curling around everything like a cloying shawl. You cough too. Everyone does. The hut breathes sickness. You reach for the herb pouch tucked behind the bread box. It smells like dust and dried weeds. You boil water. Thankfully, it hasn't frozen in the bucket, and toss in whatever you think might help. Thyme, if that's what it is, sage, or at least something leafy, and a scrap of honey you were saving for Christmas. You press the warm cup to your child's lips and murmur, "Drink." They do. Barely. You tell yourself it's helping. You have to. Later, you remember a story the old herbalist used to tell about a village that survived a plague by hanging garlic over every door. One family swore by a goose feather soaked in vinegar and tied around the neck. Another buried a copper coin under the hearth to draw out the evil. You've tried some of it. All of it. Nothing keeps the sickness out forever. A candle sputters in the corner. It gives off more smell than light, a mixture of fat and soot. You light another, then place them on opposite sides of the room. It makes the shadows move in ways that make your stomach clench. But at least the room feels less like a tomb. You wrap your child tighter in blankets. They're shaking now, teeth chattering despite the heat from their forehead. You whisper the same words your mother used to say to you. It's just the cold, it'll pass. Even though sometimes it didn't. Sometimes the cold stayed. Sometimes it settled in the chest and refused to leave. Sometimes it took the youngest ones, the oldest ones, the mothers, the midwives, the priest. Sometimes it took all of them. You've seen the cart roll by, the one pulled by the man with the wooden cross around his neck and the hollow eyes. "Bring out your dead," he doesn't say aloud. He just stops in the middle of the village and waits. You remember last winter when he came 3 times in 1 week. You're not letting it happen again. Not in this house. You throw on your cloak and step outside. The wind hits you like a slap. The world is blue and gray, the color of bruises. Snow falls sideways, slicing across your cheeks. You push through the drifts toward the church. The bell doesn't ring for mass anymore, only funerals. You're not here to pray. You're here for help. Brother Elric opens the door, his face pinched, his robe stiff with frost. He sees your face and nods. No words. He returns a moment later with a bundle, dried herbs, a piece of beeswax, and a soft cloth. You say thank you. He just pats your shoulder. It's the closest thing to medicine you've got. Back home, the child's breath comes in short, rattling wheezes. You mix the herbs with hot water, press the beeswax cloth to their chest, and begin to hum. A lullaby, maybe, or just the sound of a voice. Anything to let them know you're still here. Here's a fringe fact. Some people used to believe that singing during illness helped chase away the spirits causing it. That melody could confuse the Grim Reaper. So you sing, off-key and trembling. You hope it's enough. The others watch quietly from the corners. One mends a sock. One feeds straw to the goat. No one speaks. You're all listening. A breeze creeps under the door, fluttering the edge of the curtain. The fire crackles. The sick child's eyes open, glassy, confused, but open. They whisper, "Is it spring yet?" You lie again. Almost. You stay by their side all night, feeding broth by the spoonful and wiping their brow with damp rags. The candle burns down. You nod off, face resting near the edge of the bed, only to jolt awake when the child shifts. They're still breathing. For now. You rise stiffly and stretch your back. Outside, the wind howls like a thing with teeth. Inside, the fire has gone out again. You light it with shaking hands, coaxing flame from the last dry splinters. You'll have to fetch more wood. You'll have to beg the reeve. You'll have to pray. You'll have to keep going. Because you can't afford to lose another. You watch as the child falls into a deeper sleep. Their fever ebbs, slightly. Enough to let you hope. You settle in beside them, the blanket pulled up to your chin. The room is still cold, but somehow less cruel. Maybe it's the wax cloth. Maybe it's the singing. Maybe it's just that tonight no one died. That feels like a victory. You don't tell the children, you don't tell yourself. But tomorrow's stew just got smaller. That night, you stare at the ceiling. It leaks in the corner now, a single drop every 10 seconds. You count them instead of sheep. 1, 2, 3. Outside, the wind has changed. It whistles through the trees like a lullaby sung by wolves. Inside, you whisper to the fire again, hoping it doesn't die before you do. Your stomach growls. Your heart thumps. And tomorrow, you'll be hungry again. But you'll wake up. Probably. You stare at the fire, then past it, then through it. You're not sure how long you've been sitting like this. Minutes. Hours. Time in winter has no edges, just a gray blur between waking and waiting. Behind you, the child sleeps quietly now. The fever has dipped, like a storm passing just close enough to rattle the windows, but not tear off the roof. You'd exhale in relief if your ribs didn't ache from holding tension all night. You rise slowly, knees popping like old floorboards, and wrap your cloak tighter. There's no more wood in the pile, no more herbs in the pouch, no more flour in the sack. You're starting to run out of no more, and you still have weeks of winter to go. You know what must be done, and you hate it. You leave the hut and make your way up the hill to the manor house. Even from a distance, the castle seems to laugh at the idea of winter. Its turrets and stone towers loom high above the fields, banners fluttering in the wind like they're taunting the sky. But you know better. You know that even behind stone walls and velvet curtains, winter finds its way in. Historians still argue whether medieval castles were any warmer than peasant homes. Sure, they had tapestries, servants, roaring hearths the size of a wagon, but they also had long, drafty halls, icy staircases, and more windows than any sane person should own in a cold climate. You can wear gold, but it won't keep your toes from turning blue. You knock on the heavy wooden gate. The porter eyes you from the small door, recognizing your face and expression both. He lets you in with a grunt, then disappears back into the warm gloom. Inside, it's a different kind of cold, less biting, more smug, the kind of cold that wears perfume. You wipe your boots on the mat and enter the great hall. The hearth here is massive, fed constantly by a young boy who sweats in the heat of it. You think briefly about standing beside him for just a moment of warmth. But you're not here for warmth. Lady Margaret appears from a side door, her shoes clicking on the stone. She's wrapped in furs, fine ones. Her cheeks are powdered, her hair neat. She looks like she belongs to another world entirely. And in a way, she does. You bow. Not deeply, just enough. I've come about my child, you say. We've no more wood, no herbs. I wouldn't ask if... She holds up a hand. Not impatiently, but like she's heard this script before. I'll see what I can spare, she says. Wait here. And she leaves. That's the thing about nobility. They're not all cruel, just distant, like gods who sometimes remember the mortals below them. Lady Margaret is one of the kinder ones. She's been known to send stews to the sick, to sell off trinkets to buy bread. Some say she once gave her own cloak to a beggar, but kindness is a currency, and hers is running low this winter. You wait by the hearth, eyes fixed on the fire, resisting the urge to warm your hands. You don't want to seem greedy, don't want to linger too long. The boy feeding logs glances at you with something between pity and envy. A fringed tale comes to mind. Some castles had entire rooms filled with straw just to trap heat. Others burned dry dung in gold-plated braziers. You think about what it would take to feel warm again. Not just not cold, but truly warm. You try to remember. Lady Margaret returns with a small bundle, some rosemary, a half-used beeswax candle, a few strips of linen, and a small wooden token marked with her crest. This will get you a sack of wood, she says. Show it to the reeve. You thank her, genuinely. But on the way home, you wonder what happens when the reeve runs out of sacks. Or mercy. The village is quiet as you return. Smoke rises from a few chimneys, not many. One home is dark. You wonder if it's empty or just out of fuel. Maybe both. You keep your head down. Back inside your hut, the children rush to you like you've returned from sea. You give them the bundle and let them take the herbs to the sickbed. One child rubs the linen against her cheek, marveling at its softness. You show the wooden token to your eldest. They nod and bolt outside to find the reeve before he drinks away his helpfulness. The stew pot is empty again, but the fire's crackling once more, and that's something. You sit down, you breathe, you rest your head against the wall, and finally allow yourself to shiver, because even castles can't keep the cold out. Not fully, but you brought something better home today. Belief that it can be pushed back, even if just for one more night. The wind howls at the door again, the same as it always does. But tonight, you don't answer it. You just sit by the fire, the lady's herbs simmering in a tin cup beside you, and listen to your child sleep quietly behind you. It's not a victory exactly, but it isn't defeat either. And sometimes, in winter, that's enough. The calendar may claim it's the middle of January, but today doesn't feel like any ordinary winter day, because today is Feast of Fools. You wake up to laughter, real, genuine, ridiculous laughter, high-pitched giggles and drunken howls echoing from the village green, like someone lit joy on fire and let it spread. You peek through the shutters and blink in disbelief. There, stumbling through the snowdrifts in borrowed robes and a crown made of bread crust, is the town's pig herder. Beside him, the miller's wife, riding a wheelbarrow like it's a royal chariot, waving a ladle like a scepter. You rub your eyes. Nope. Still happening. You open the door and immediately regret it. An apple core flies past your head. Someone cheers. A goat in a priest's cloak charges past. You think maybe you're hallucinating. You're not. It's just that day. The Lord of Misrule has been crowned. Historians still argue whether this holiday, equal parts satire, chaos, and socially sanctioned anarchy, was born from Roman Saturnalia or pure medieval necessity. Either way, it's the one time of year when peasants become priests, servants become lords, and dignity gets left in the snowbank. You bundle up and step outside, drawn more by curiosity than celebration. After all, you haven't laughed in weeks, maybe longer. And there's something dangerously alluring about the idea of mocking the very misery you've been choking on since November. In the square, it's utter mayhem. Children wear cabbage leaf crowns. Old men dance barefoot on icy cobbles. The baker is pretending to be the bishop, delivering blessings and bread rolls with equal authority. And someone has draped a pig in velvet and named it the Pope. You catch yourself laughing, not politely, not softly, full-throated, wheezing, joy-punched laughter that shocks your own lungs. You forgot what it felt like. A fringe fact for you. In some regions, the Lord of Misrule wasn't just a silly party role. It was elected. By dice sometimes, or by hiding a bean in a cake and seeing who got the lucky bite. That person ruled for the day, no matter how absurd or awful they were the rest of the year. Even the local priest had to obey, usually with a grimace and a very strong drink. Today, your village's Lord of Misrule, Gerald the Goat Keeper, is bellowing out commandments between swigs of mead. By royal decree, he announces, teetering on a stool, no one shall frown for the next hour, or you shall be sentenced to tickle stocks. Also, bring me more cheese. Someone actually runs off to fetch some. There's no real food surplus today. No banquet. The feast is dried apples, old onions, and a communal pot of questionable stew. But it's shared, and it's hot. And that's enough. You find yourself pulled into a ring of dancing peasants, skipping and stomping in rhythm to a hurdy-gurdy that's only slightly out of tune. Your feet ache, your ribs protest, but you keep going. Not because you feel good, but because this is what survival sometimes looks like. There's something oddly sacred about the silliness. Something necessary, like your bones need the laughter as much as your stomach needs the stew. The local reeve, who usually patrols the village like a buzzard in boots, is currently wearing a feathered hat and shouting bad poetry from the well's edge. Even Lady Margaret Stewart makes an appearance, begrudgingly but present, handing out honeyed crumbs from a tray with a scowl that could curdle milk. For a few hours, the invisible lines dissolve. Rich and poor, sick and strong, sober and sozzled, they're all just people trying not to freeze. And sometimes that means putting a chicken in a bishop's hat and dancing in circles until your legs give out. It's absurd. And it's perfect. As the sun begins to set, which in winter feels like about 15 minutes after it rose, the energy begins to sag. Laughter turns to soft chuckles. The goat pope escapes. The stew pot is empty. People drift homeward, limping on sore feet, in frozen toes, but somehow walking taller. You help pick up the remains, fallen scarves, a lost shoe, someone's ladle crown, and tuck them near the firewood pile for next year. Someone might want to be absurd again. You return home, cheeks still warm from the cold and the joy. The children are huddled under blankets, having spent the day watching through cracks in the door. You tell them what they missed: the pig pope, the bread crown, the dancing reeve, and they giggle in the half-dark. One of them coughs, but even that sounds softer today. Here's a theory. Maybe people made fools of themselves on purpose, once a year, to trick winter into thinking it had already won, and then they laughed in its face. You stoke the fire, hang your damp cloak to dry, and pour a bit of leftover broth into a cracked cup. It's lukewarm, bland, and slightly gritty, but tonight it tastes like celebration. You sit beside the fire and smile, a real one. Not the kind you wear like armor, but the kind that sneaks up from somewhere deeper, somewhere that still believes this might all turn out okay. Because if a goat can be pope, maybe anything's possible. You wake to quiet, not the silence of absence, but the soft hush of a village still resting after a rare night of laughter. No voices outside, no clatter from the smithy. Even the chickens seem to be sleeping in. The world feels paused, like it's catching its breath. You stretch beneath the woolen blankets, now slightly damp from the night's cold. The fire has gone out, but you don't rush to relight it. For once, the frost creeping along the walls feels more like decoration than menace. You get up slowly, feeling the echo of yesterday's dancing in your legs. Your knees crack like kindling. One of the children is already awake, curled by the window, tracing shapes into the frost on the glass. "Is it really over?" they ask. You smile faintly. Yes, back to the real world. And the real world is hungry. You take stock of the kitchen corner. The shelves are sparse, a heel of bread that's mostly crust, one onion with a soft spot, and a jar of something you can't identify by sight or smell. You set it aside. You're not that desperate. Yet. But you have a secret weapon. Your neighbor, Ada. Ada is a widow and tough as boiled roots. She lives 2 huts down with 3 cats, no husband, and an uncanny ability to stretch a beat into a banquet. If anyone can make food appear out of sheer stubbornness, it's her. You bundle up and crunch across the snow-covered path to her door. When you knock, she calls out, "Unless you're death or a goose, come in." You enter. Her hut smells like cabbage, firewood, and sarcasm. The cats eye you suspiciously from their various perches. Eda herself is stirring something in a pot, wearing 5 layers and a look that could thaw a pond. "Came to beg?" she asks. "Came to barter." She raises an eyebrow. "You hold out the onion and the bread heel." She considers. "For what?" she says. "Whatever's in that pot." She snorts. "It's mostly water and attitude." "Perfect. I've got neither." She relents. "You sit." She pours 2 bowls and hands one to you. It's hot, salty. There's a stray piece of carrot floating like a miracle. You sip in silence. Here's a mainstream fact. During harsh winters, many medieval peasants survived on pottage, a thick, often meatless stew that simmered constantly and changed ingredients depending on what could be found, begged, or scraped from under floorboards. Ada's version is thin, but it's real food. And more importantly, it's shared. She eyes your bowl as you eat. You hear about Thomas. You pause. "Which Thomas?" "Lame-footed one, up near the church." You shake your head. "Gone," she says. "2 nights ago, tried to make it to his sister's. Didn't." Your stomach clenches. "Not from the stew." She sighs. "Spring can't come fast enough." You nod, though you're not sure if spring will come at all. After the meal, you offer to help her chop wood in return. The axe is dull, the logs are wet, but together you manage enough for the next 2 nights. You talk as you work, about nothing and everything, about how the old priest used to snore during sermons, about how last year the river froze so hard a man walked across it carrying a goat, about how Ida once tricked a tax collector into thinking she was blind so he'd stop asking for bread. These stories aren't just distractions, they're survival mechanisms, oral insulation. Historians sometimes underestimate this part of medieval life, the economy of mutual aid. Without neighbors, you died. Without shared meals and borrowed salt and whispered warnings, the world was simply too cruel. Community wasn't optional, it was currency. You head home with a warm belly and 3 extra pieces of firewood tucked under your arm. You're greeted at the door by a child with soot on their nose and one of Ida's cats, who has apparently decided to move in. The stew pot simmers again by nightfall, slightly fuller now, thanks to Ida's gift of barley and your desperate scraping of carrot ends. The children eat with enthusiasm. Even the sick one manages a few mouthfuls. Later, after they've all curled up in the corner, you sneak outside for a moment of quiet. The sky is absurdly clear. The stars above you look like spilled salt, cold and brilliant. You exhale, watching your breath drift skyward like a prayer. Then you hear a crunch in the snow. It's Jakob, the young man who lost his wife last winter. He's holding a bundle of sticks and a small jar. "Ada told me you might need these," he says. "It's goose fat for the sick one's chest." You nod. He doesn't stay, just hands you the things and disappears into the dark again, like a ghost with manners. You go inside, warm the fat, and rub it gently onto your child's chest. They stir, murmur something about apples, then fall asleep again. You curl up nearby, blanket over your shoulders, heart slightly less heavy. Not because everything's better, but because tonight you remembered you're not alone. You wake to wind, not the playful kind that tickles shutters and sings in the chimney, but a full-throated roar that howls like a pack of wolves loose in the sky, the kind that slaps the roof and makes even the bravest dog crawl under a bench. You sit up, already knowing no one's going anywhere today. Still, after a quick check on the children, who thankfully are all asleep, one drooling on to the other, You pull on your cloak and step outside. The door fights you like it wants to stay closed, but you win the tug of war and brace yourself in the threshold. And just like that, the world disappears. The snow comes sideways, fast and thick, erasing the path in seconds. The sky is white. The ground is white. Everything in between is white noise. If you were to step 5 paces forward, you might vanish entirely, which, as it happens, is exactly what you fear has already happened to someone. Old Wilhelm didn't come back last night. He was supposed to fetch salt from his cousin's mill before the storm hit. They warned him not to go. Ada did, the Reeve did. Even the cat might have said something in its own way. But he's stubborn. And when you're that old, sometimes stubbornness is the only thing left to carry you. So now, with the snow stacking higher by the hour, you wonder, how long before someone notices that he's gone? Truly gone. Here's a historical fact. Medieval roads were barely roads at all in the best of weather. In winter, they became death traps. Deep ruts filled with ice. Bridges slick with moss and sleet. Waymarkers buried under snow. People got lost 10 minutes from home, sometimes forever. And yet, you wrap a scarf around your face, tuck flint into your pouch, and grab a torch. Because sometimes the dumbest thing you can do is also the kindest. You set out. 3 steps in, and your legs are already wet. You follow the hedgerow as best you can, one hand dragging along the frozen branches like a blind guide. Visibility is a joke. You see your own hands, your own breath, and that's about it. Everything else is either gone or pretending to be. A quirky tidbit, some villagers used to hang dried fish or rags soaked in lye from trees to mark paths during whiteouts. Others trained dogs to guide them back. More reliable than husbands, some said. You don't have a dog, just determination, half a torch, and one neighbor-shaped worry. You call out his name. Once, then again, louder, nothing. You keep walking, listening for anything other than wind and heartbeats. And then, there, a shape. Slumped, not far from the fork in the path where the footbridge crosses the stream. You stumble toward it, slipping once and cursing softly into your scarf. Wilhelm. He's half covered in snow, knees tucked to his chest like a tired bird. His beard is white with frost. His eyes flutter when you touch his shoulder. Alive, barely. You use what strength you have to heave him up, then sling his arm around your shoulder like a sack of turnips. It's slow going. He mutters nonsense, something about pancakes and dragons. You keep walking. By the time you see the first glimmer of smoke from your own roof, your knees are shaking. The snow has numbed your legs into wooden clubs. But you don't stop. The door bursts open as you reach it. Ada, of course. She takes one look, grabs Wilhelm's other arm, and together you drag him inside like some snow-drenched miracle. He collapses by the hearth. The children stare, eyes wide. You're already preparing the blanket pile, stoking the fire, warming a stone to press to his chest. Ada pinches his earlobe, hard. He grunts. Good sign. Old fool, she mutters, even as she rubs his hands between hers. Later, after the panic fades, the children ask why you went. You shrug, because no one else did. They seem confused. And that maybe is the best sign of all, that they're still young enough to be surprised by someone risking frostbite for a neighbor. That night, the storm still rages, but inside there's life. Wilhelm snores on the floor like a piglet in a haystack. Ada dozes in a chair, one hand on her cup. The children pass around a scrap of bread like it's gold. You sip broth and try not to shiver. Historians still argue whether medieval communities were more close-knit out of love or necessity. You suspect the answer is both. Love was necessity, and necessity taught people how to love. You settle back against the wall, exhausted, but oddly lighter. Not because you beat the storm, but because, for once, you didn't have to do it alone. And tomorrow will come, storm or not. Morning comes with stillness. No wind, no howling, no doors creaking like haunted violins. Just the heavy silence of a snow-blanketed world too tired to keep fighting. It's the kind of hush that settles deep in your bones, and for a moment you think you might still be dreaming. You stretch beneath the blanket, careful not to jostle Wilhelm, who now occupies your floor with the stubborn persistence of moss on stone. He snores loudly. It's oddly comforting. The children are stirring too, one rubbing their eyes with red fists, the other trying to sneak a peek at the snow from under the doorframe. You rise. Outside, the world is transformed. The storm has dropped a thick coat over everything. The trees, the rooftops, the paths that used to be roads. Nothing moves, save a few birds hopping near the thatched eaves. The entire village looks like a bakery display, powdered, pristine, and slightly unreal. And then you hear it, the sound of shovels. You step outside, half expecting it to be a hallucination. But no, it's real. The neighbors are digging. There's Ida wielding a shovel like it owes her money. Jakob clearing a path to the well. Even the Reeve is out, sleeves rolled, red-faced and sweating, directing traffic like a conductor with a frostbitten nose. They're digging out the village together. You grab your own shovel and join in. Historians often note that medieval villages functioned like extended families during winter. Labor wasn't just about survival, it was communal ritual. You dug out your neighbor's door because tomorrow they might be the one digging out yours. You start with your own steps, then move to the well, helping clear a path so the village's only water source doesn't turn into a skating rink of doom. There's laughter, strained but real. Someone slips on ice and lands in a drift. They pop up, spitting snow and swearing vengeance on the weather gods. Someone else starts singing a terribly off-key song about cabbage soup and saintly goats. No one asks them to stop. And then comes the real miracle, the sun. Just for a few moments, it pierces the clouds like a spotlight. The snow glitters. The icicles drip. Children emerge from houses like curious foxes, bundled in every scrap of cloth their mothers could find, chasing each other with sticks and war cries. You pause to watch, leaning on your shovel. One of the children builds a snow figure. Not just a man, but a bishop, complete with mitre, crooked staff, and a disapproving scowl, clearly modeled after the real village priest. Ada snorts when she sees it. Better posture than the original, she mutters. You're called back to task when a plank of roof creaks ominously. You and Jakob work quickly to knock snow from it with poles, avoiding what would have been a cold, wet collapse. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval villagers intentionally kept their roofs uneven, so snow would fall off naturally rather than build up. Others trained children to climb up and kick it off. Highly illegal, highly effective. You work until your shoulders ache. Your gloves are soaked and your cheeks sting from cold and wind. But something strange happens as you dig. You feel stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. Like the shoveling isn't just uncovering paths, it's uncovering purpose. You're not alone in this. Never were. By midday, the village paths are visible again, muddy, uneven but passable. A clear walkway now winds from the well to the chapel, from the chapel to the manor, from the manor to the farthest hut where the blind shepherd lives. That night, you share a meal in Ada's hut. She's somehow acquired a hen. No one asks how. The stew is thicker than usual. There's even a bit of dried apple for dessert, softened in warm wine. The room is cramped. Wilhelm, still groggy but grateful, sits wedged between two cats, but it's cozy. The children fall asleep in a pile of blankets, full for the first time in days. You sip from a shared mug and listen as the adults trade stories. Jakob talks about his father, who once drove a cart full of pigs into a lake by mistake and swore they were fish. Ada recounts the time she buried coins under her cabbage patch to confuse a taxman. Even the Reeve admits begrudgingly that he once lost a bet and had to dress as a chicken for an entire Lent. You laugh until your ribs hurt, and then, without prompting, you all fall quiet. There's nothing left to say, just firelight, soft breathing, and the strange sense that, for now at least, you've all made it a little farther than winter expected you to. Historians still debate how much happiness existed in the average peasant life, but they often overlook nights like this. The quiet victories, the simple warmth of company, the way laughter makes a cold room feel like summer for just a few moments. You lean back. Outside, snow melts in soft drips from the eaves. Inside, you begin to believe. The thaw is a lie. It always is. You wake the next morning to slush creeping in through the walls and a suspicious dampness under your left boot. The world outside has transformed again, not into the spring you dared hope for, but into something worse. Mud. Not just puddles and soggy paths. Remember, this is medieval mud, a creature all its own, thick, sucking knee-deep in places, clinging to everything like an over-attached X. And, of course, it stinks. The snow didn't vanish. It rotted. You open the door and your boot makes a sound that is both wet and offensive. You almost close it again out of spite, but today's not a day for staying in. Because today is Market Day. The first in weeks. It's not much. A few wagons from nearby hamlets, some dried goods, maybe a rabbit or two if you're lucky. But it's a chance to trade, to scavenge for salt or wool, and more importantly, to hear news from outside the village. You bundle yourself in layers that creak when you move. You shove the smallest child at Ida's door with a piece of dried bread and a plea for babysitting. She grunts and takes them without a word. Off you go. The path to the village green is a battlefield. One misstep and your foot sinks so deep you have to dig it out like treasure. A passing ox cart sprays your entire side with muck. A chicken laughs at you. Probably. But eventually, you arrive. It's chaos. Glorious, squalid chaos. There's a man selling onions that look like they've seen war. A woman hawking fresh eels that are moving suspiciously slowly. Someone is trading buttons for firewood. Someone else is offering a goat in exchange for poetry. You browse, you barter, you overhear. And that's when you hear it. The rumor. They say the miller in Hawkhurst died, froze to death with a sack of flour on his back. They say his wife's moved into the chapel. Did you hear? Wolves took 2 sheep from the next hamlet over in daylight. My cousin says the river cracked, froze, then broke, took a cow with it. Each tale more awful than the last, and yet no one stops trading. No one turns away. Because in this world, even tragedy is just part of the inventory. Mainstream fact: medieval markets weren't just economic hubs. They were social lifelines. They were how news spread, alliances formed, and, occasionally, how someone ended up married after too much cider and a poorly timed compliment. You managed to trade your last usable spoon for a sack of barley. It's not much, but it's more than you had yesterday. Then you see him, the stranger. He stands at the edge of the green, wrapped in a fur cloak that doesn't match the mud on his boots. His eyes scan the crowd like he's searching for something or someone. He doesn't speak, doesn't buy, just watches. You feel something cold slip down your spine. Strangers in a village like yours. Uncommon. Strangers who don't talk. Unsettling. A debate still lingers among historians. Were such figures wandering minstrels, messengers, thieves, or something worse? You decide not to find out. You finish your business and begin the treacherous journey home. Sack of barley over one shoulder, boots growing heavier by the second. Halfway back, it starts to rain. Cold, mean, sideways rain that doesn't so much fall as attack. You slip twice. Once you go down completely, barley landing beside you in a splash. You laugh, loud and slightly manic, because at this point, what else is there to do? You arrive at your hut soaked, shivering, and looking like you lost a mud wrestling match to a pig. The child at Edda's is clean, cheerful, and drawing on the wall with charcoal. Of course, you clean up. You make barley porridge. You don't talk about the stranger. That night, you sit by the fire, children fed, toes finally dry, and wonder, how long can people live like this? And the answer creeps in quietly. Longer than you'd think. Because surviving isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just showing up at market with 2 onions and a bad attitude. Sometimes it's enduring the mud, the rain, the whispers of wolves, the man who doesn't speak. Sometimes it's laughing anyway. Sometimes it's living despite it all. You don't know if spring is coming, but you know you'll be here when it does. The next day arrives under a strange light, pale gold, cold but gentle, like sunlight through old linen. It pools on the snow crust, lingers in puddles, turns icicles into chandeliers. It's not warmth yet, not really, but it's a promise. You open your door with less dread than usual. Birdsong. Real, actual birdsong. Not the desperate squawk of a half-frozen crow, but a proper trill. Cheerful, even smug. You peer up at the roof and spot a robin puffed up like it owns the place. You almost say good morning. Inside, the air smells faintly less like damp wool and more like, could it be, earth. The mud hasn't dried, but it's thinking about it. The snow hasn't melted, but it's reconsidering. You get to work. Today's chore, clearing the drainage ditches. The storm clogged them days ago, and if you don't act fast, your home will soon become a very disappointing moat. Out come the tools, shovel, rake, a stick with ambition. You dig. It's disgusting work. The slush fights back. The ice refreezes your fingers every few minutes. At one point, you uncover something that might have once been a rat or a saint, but the water moves, slowly, grudgingly, like an old man rising from a warm bed. And then you see them, shoots. Tiny, absurdly brave green spears poking through the filth. Not many, not strong, but alive. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Medieval people were obsessed with the changing of seasons, especially the first signs of spring. Calendars were often organized around planting cycles, and entire festivals erupted over the first snowdrop or sprouting bean. They weren't symbols, they were salvation. You finish your work and sit on the stoop, mud-caked, sore, and weirdly proud. From across the way, Jacob waves. He's building a cold frame, a simple wooden box with a pane of glass on top. It'll trap heat and let him plant early. You nod approvingly. Clever man. Even Ida has hung her laundry. Not just rags for drying, but her nice linens, the ones with faint embroidery. She hasn't aired those in months. They flap in the breeze like white flags. Or maybe battle standards. You wonder if she feels it too. That something's shifting, not just in the weather, in the village, in you. You spend the afternoon in the garden, not planting, too early, but preparing. You pull the frost-heaved stones back into their rows. You test the soil with your fingers, breaking up clumps like old grudges. You find a worm. It's slow and sleepy, but there. Another promise, a quirky tidbit. Some medieval peasants believed worms were signs of buried treasure. Others thought they were miniature dragons. Either way, you welcome the little beast like royalty. By sunset, your back aches and your hands are raw, but your mind is strangely clear. Dinner is modest, barley again, with a pinch of salt and the last of the preserved greens. But it tastes different. Not better, necessarily, just earned. As the fire crackles, the children ask questions. Will it be warm tomorrow? Will the sheep have lambs soon? Will we plant carrots again? You answer as best you can, mostly with maybe, because maybe is enough. Historians still argue whether hope was common among medieval peasants. Some say they were too consumed by survival. Others insist that hope was survival, that without it, no one would have endured the mud, the frost, the emptiness of February. You think about that as you climb into bed. How fragile spring is. How it begins not with sunshine, but with not quite rain, with meltwater, with patience, with green things small enough to be mistaken for weeds. You fall asleep with dirt under your nails and something lighter in your chest. Hope doesn't arrive like a feast. It arrives like a seed. You wake before the sun, not from cold, not from hunger, but from silence so deep it hums. The kind of silence that makes you listen harder, not because something is wrong, but because something might finally be right. You rise quietly, careful not to wake the children who are sprawled in the blanket nest like puppies. Ada once joked that if you toss straw over them, they'd sleep until midsummer. Outside, the world has changed again. There's mist. Not the threatening kind that swallows roads, but a soft silver breath hugging the thatched roofs and curling over fields. The snow is mostly gone now, receding like a tide that overstayed its welcome. The ground is squishy, the kind that holds your footprint like a memory. The path glistens. The air smells of wet bark and the faint, thrilling scent of growth. You walk to the commons without a coat, not because it's warm, you're not that foolish, but because it's less cold. Your sleeves soak up the dew like blessings, and there, at the far end of the field, you see it, the sheep. They're back. They'd been corralled closer to the manor during the worst of winter, but now they're grazing again, picking through soggy patches of grass, baaing with the kind of casual entitlement only livestock can manage. You grin, because this means milk, which means cheese, which means hope with a rind. A mainstream fact. In the medieval calendar, the return of livestock to open pasture marked not just spring, but economic renewal. A family's wealth could quite literally walk on four legs. You're joined by others, Jakob carrying a new wooden yoke, Edda muttering about laundry day being ruined by lamb poop, Even Wilhelm, now fully recovered and insisting on teaching the children how to spot edible weeds, the village begins to breathe again. Repairs start in earnest. Roofs are patched. Fence posts are reset. Someone starts rethatching a shed while singing about turnips in love. You find yourself chuckling more often, not because things are easy, but because they're finally not impossible. And then, the fair. It's not much. A spring gathering at the edge of the village, little more than a few stalls and a lot of shouting. But it's life. Someone juggles apples. A woman dances while balancing a goose on her head. The blacksmith's son tries to impress a girl by lifting a barrel and nearly drops it on his foot. Classic romance. You buy a single sweet, a fig, sun-dried and slightly gritty. It costs a full day's barter, and you eat it like it's forbidden. A quirky tidbit. In some regions, it was tradition to bury a sweet, usually a bit of honey bread, under the threshold of your home in early spring to lure good luck in and keep hardship out. You're not that superstitious, but later you crumble the fig stem into the garden anyway. Why not? The children run wild, faces flushed, hair tangled, fingers sticky. No one stops them. For once, even the reeve looks less like he's swallowed a lemon. You speak with a traveler from the next village. He's brought dried herbs and stories. The monks at the hilltop priory have lost 3 cows but gained a new bell. The road east is flooded, but the westward pass might open by midsummer. Someone saw a comet. Or maybe it was just a drunken owl. Historians still argue whether peasants in the Middle Ages believed in progress or merely in survival. You're not sure anymore that there's a difference. Because tonight, as you sit with your feet in the cold grass and watch the sun dip behind the trees, you feel it. The shift. Not dramatic. Not like a knight galloping in with a trumpet. Just a slow, sure change. Like bread rising. Like marrow warming. Like something long frozen starting to melt deep inside. You smile without meaning to. And when the children fall asleep in your lap, one thumb in mouth, the other clutching a stolen flower, you don't move. Not yet. Because this moment feels like everything you worked for in the cold and everything you're still learning to trust again. Spring doesn't arrive in a grand parade. It tiptoes in. One soft breeze, one stubborn flower, one morning without frost at a time. And then suddenly, without fanfare, you realize it's here. You're outside before the rooster crows. The light is different now, less shy. The kind of golden that makes mud look almost majestic, like a poor man wearing borrowed silk. The dew on the grass no longer bites your ankles, it tickles. You stretch, and your back answers with a series of cracks that suggest you're either getting old or finally slept on something softer than a sack of kindling. The birds are louder now, not just chirping, but performing. And the fields, those stubborn brown slabs you cursed all winter, are waking up too. You walk the edge of the garden, squinting at rows you've hoed so many times you could do it blindfolded. But now there's green. Actual, edible green. Spinach, maybe. A few beans poking their heads up like shy children in church. It's a miracle you never doubt, but always fear won't come. That's the thing about medieval spring. It isn't just beautiful, it's vital. A single week of late frost could undo a season's work. A misplaced hoofprint could crush a month's food. And still, somehow, it all grows. A mainstream fact. The medieval agricultural calendar was closely tied to religious rituals. Rogation days in late spring were marked with prayer walks around the fields, asking for divine protection for crops. You don't have a priest leading a parade, but you do find yourself muttering blessings at every leaf. Jakob shows up mid-morning with a bucket of compost and a grin. "Smells like heaven," he says, dumping it by your carrots. Edda follows with her own offering, a basket of nettles and dandelion greens. "Spring salad," she declares, "for when you're tired of your insides being beige." She's not wrong. You boil the greens lightly, toss them with vinegar and a pinch of salt. It tastes like sour dirt. You go back for seconds. At lunch, you sit on the threshold and eat while watching bees drunkenly bump into everything. One lands on your sleeve, wobbles, and flies off. You nod in solidarity. Then the news arrives. Wilhelm, fully revived and somehow still talking, comes striding through the village with an expression that says he's bursting to deliver something dramatic. "The road to Ashcombe is passable again," he announces. "They say the Baron's messengers rode through this morning. There's to be a feast, music, maybe even he lowers his voice, play." You blink. A traveling troupe, real actors, maybe puppets. Edda lets out a noise that might be a squeal. Here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval theater troupes often traveled in spring and summer, bringing morality plays, saints' legends, or outright chaos to towns that hadn't heard laughter in months. They slept in barns, performed in squares, and sometimes accidentally started fires. All part of the magic. The children go feral at the idea. You promise, cautiously, that you'll go if the weather holds. And it does. The next few days blur into warmth. You wake earlier, work longer, sleep better. The muscles that once curled in on themselves from cold now stretch into action. Tools are oiled, seeds are pressed into dirt with reverent thumbs. The manor bell rings more often, orders mostly. A call for extra hands in the fields, another demand for barley tax. But even that doesn't sting as much now, because it's spring. And for the first time in months, it feels like you're doing something, not just enduring. You even find time to fix the broken spindle. It hums under your touch, wood against wool, and you marvel that your fingers still remember how to make something beautiful. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants experienced joy in the same way we do. They measure happiness by surviving children, taxes paid, a winter without starvation. But they forget this. The feeling of sun on the back of your neck while turning over earth you once thought dead. The shared laughter over a botched batch of nettle beer. The giddy anticipation of actors with paper crowns and wooden swords. They forget that joy doesn't need luxury. It needs relief. You finish the day filthy and sun-drunk, barefoot in your doorway, chewing on a piece of mint you didn't plant. It just grew. You watch the stars blink alive above a world that finally stopped trying to kill you. And for the first time in too long, you don't feel afraid of tomorrow. You don't notice the warmth at first. You notice what's missing. No more frozen fingers in the morning. No smoke curling from every roof just to survive breakfast. No endless scraping at lard that refuses to thaw. Instead, stillness. A kind of peace that feels suspicious. Until you realize this isn't a trap. It's spring, in full bloom. You survived. And now, the work begins again. Today, you mend the fence. One of the sheep, Florence, the escape artist, has decided the barley field looks tastier than her pasture. She's not wrong, but you can't allow it. So, you dig out the hammer, locate nails after a 20-minute scavenger hunt, and set to work. The wood's damp but pliable. The sun keeps peeking out behind clouds like a shy baker testing dough. You're sweating by mid-morning, but it feels earned. Florence watches from a respectful distance, probably plotting her next move. As you work, you think back. Winter was brutal. You almost didn't make it through. Your youngest lost too much weight. Jacob nearly froze on a 3-minute walk to the well. The smoke in the hut thickened your lungs like porridge. And yet, here you are, building things again. A mainstream fact, the mortality rate during medieval winters could spike by up to 25% in some regions. Entire villages sometimes vanished between January and March. But many survived, not by strength alone, but through community, instinct, and the occasional well-timed miracle. You pause for a sip of rainwater and think about miracles. Maybe they're not grand. Maybe they're just mornings like this. By noon, Ida wanders over with a bowl of something that smells heavenly and slightly illegal. Dandelion root stew, she announces. Also, 3 peas. Don't ask where I got them. You don't. You both sit under the eaves and eat in companionable silence, the way only people who've survived something quietly traumatic together can. The children are off playing with sticks that are definitely swords. One of them is crowned king. The others are very bad at bowing. You smile. And then Jakob arrives, breathless, carrying something wrapped in linen. It's bread. Actual, real, honest-to-God bread. Yeasty, golden, slightly lopsided. Flour from Ashcombe, he says. Had to trade a chicken, 3 fishhooks, and my dignity. Worth it. He breaks the loaf, hands out warm pieces. You bite in. And for a moment, it's like your body remembers what it's for. This isn't survival food. This is celebration. A quirky tidbit. Some villages had a tradition called bread blessing, where the first loaf of spring was passed around the whole community. Each bite symbolizing renewal. You didn't plan a ceremony, but it feels like one anyway. After lunch, you walk the fields, not inspecting, not planning, just looking. Letting yourself see what winter almost took. There are furrows now where there was once just frozen dirt. Bees wobble over blossoms. The air smells like damp wood, cut grass, and something else. Something like the future. You pass the place where you buried the neighbor's child in January. Wildflowers have begun to grow there. Purple, soft, brave things. You stop, kneel, touch the earth, not to mourn, to acknowledge. Historians still argue whether peasants developed emotional attachments to land. Some say they worked it as property, others as prison. But they forget. When you survive winter with the same field that nearly killed you, it's not just soil anymore. It's a partner, a memory, a vow. You whisper something you don't quite understand, a thank you. A promise, maybe both. Then you rise, because Florence is back in the barley. And it turns out today's miracle might involve chasing a sheep with a stick and no dignity whatsoever. And you're okay with that. Tonight, the sky is clear. No clouds, no mist, just stars. More than you remembered existed. They hang above the village like pinpricks in a velvet curtain, cold and perfect and wildly indifferent to whether your carrots sprout or Florence breaks another fence. You lie in the grass and let it all sink in. You survived the medieval winter. That sentence doesn't feel small. It feels enormous. Like a medal, like an ancient rite passed not through knighthood or glory, but through patience, pain, and potatoes. A soft wind curls around your ankles. It's not biting anymore. It plays. The kind of breeze that carries pollen and laughter. You close your eyes and think about every night you lay curled under threadbare blankets, listening to your children wheeze and the wind batter the walls. That world is gone. This one, though still hard, is yours again. Earlier today, a merchant wagon rolled through. He had ribbon, salt, a lute with only 4 strings, and stories from villages 2 days away. One tale stuck with you. A boy born in January who survived a fever and now won't stop trying to eat his mother's shoes. You laughed until your stomach hurt. Even Wilhelm laughed, which frankly means something might be wrong with him again. A mainstream fact: in many medieval European towns, the arrival of spring meant the renewal of oaths, land agreements, marriage contracts, even verbal promises, as if the land thawing also thawed the weight of one's word. You wonder what oaths you've made lately, silently or aloud, to protect your children, to keep feeding the fire, to find small joys, even when joy feels like a betrayal of grief. A new lamb was born this morning, tiny, awkward, shivering, but alive. The children named it Thunder, which is deeply ironic because it bleats like a sneeze and trembles at everything, including its own shadow. But thunder is theirs, and they guard it like a dragon guards gold. You found yourself watching them, caught in the loop of their joy and panic. How they hover, how they cheer, how they argue about whether to knit it a sweater. And that's when it truly hits you. They're not just surviving anymore. They're living. Not grandly, not without hardship, but living. You cleaned the soot from the hearth for the first time in weeks. Not because it's necessary, because it's nice. Because the fire now burns for comfort, not desperation. You even open the shutters, and the breeze that blows in smells of moss, rain, and the neighbor's attempt at soup. It smells like the world trying again. Historians still argue whether resilience is learned or inherited, whether people in hard times adapt because they choose to or because they must. You don't know. What you do know is that you endured, and tomorrow you'll plant more beans. You'll trade for nettles. You'll chase Florence with a bigger stick. You'll teach your youngest how to tell a weed from a treasure. And maybe, just maybe, you'll save the last slice of bread for a neighbor, because that's how the cycle holds. Not with victory, but with grace. Not with plenty, but with enough. You lie back against the grass, watching a single shooting star trail through the sky. The children sleep inside. The garden breathes outside. The world turns. And you, blessed and bruised, turn with it. The air is softer now, each breath slower than the last. You feel the weight of blankets pull you gently downward, not as a burden, but as a welcome. The night presses in, not heavy, but protective. The kind of dark that doesn't frighten you anymore, because you know what it hides and what it no longer does. The sheep are quiet. The fire is low, but warm. You can almost hear the seeds you planted whispering in the soil, growing in secret, daring frost to return. But frost won't return tonight. Not here. Not now. Tonight you're wrapped in peace, hard-earned, in silence, deeply deserved. The world has its own rhythm, one that lulls you, slow and steady, towards sleep. It tells you, you did enough. You are enough. You see the stars through closed eyes now, faint pin lights against the dark canvas behind your lids. And even as the wind sighs through the shutter cracks, you stay still, because you're not waiting for danger anymore. You're simply resting. Let the village fade. Let the past season soften. And know this, you survived what many did not. You endured when the world gave you every reason not to. That strength, that grace, that's yours now, forever. So let it hold you. Let it lull you. Let it become a warmth deeper than fire. Sleep now. You've earned it.